Richard's hands trembled as he rummaged through the boxes in his daughter Sarah's room, a mixture of nostalgia and concern swirling within him. The years had slipped by like sand through his fingers, and as a retired factory worker, he often found himself reminiscing about simpler times. Each box he opened seemed to echo with memories of laughter, late-night study sessions, and the vibrant spirit of a girl who had grown into a resilient woman. But today, the air felt different. A heaviness loomed over the cheerful clutter of her room. Suddenly, something caught his eye, a stack of envelopes, ominously out of place among the faded photographs and old textbooks. Curiosity piqued, he reached for them, each one labeled in stark red letters, "Overdue." Before we dive deeper into Richard's journey, we invite you to join us. Please subscribe to our channel. Your support is crucial and is the only way to help these heartfelt stories reach a wider audience. It means the world to us and enables us to continue sharing tales that resonate. So please subscribe now. As Richard unfolded the first letter, a rush of cold anxiety washed over him. The words blurred together as his heart raced. Medical bills. He could hardly believe what he was reading. Panic set in as he processed the implications. His daughter, who had always been fiercely independent, had hidden this from him. She had always been his pride, a beacon of hope in his otherwise challenging life. And now it seemed she was fighting a battle he knew nothing about. The bills detailed treatments, consultations, and medications, each line a reminder of a struggle that had been taking place in silence. Confusion turned to dread as he realized the depth of Sarah's silence. What had she been going through? Richard's mind raced back to her childhood, to the moments when he had made sacrifices, working late shifts to put food on the table, forgoing personal desires to ensure Sarah had the best opportunities. All those hours spent in the factory, the aching limbs at the end of the day, the relentless grind, it had all been for her. Yet now, he felt a profound sense of failure. He had thought he was shielding her from their financial struggles, but in doing so, he had unwittingly allowed her to shoulder an immense burden alone. Gathering his thoughts, he called out for Sarah, his voice echoing with a mixture of concern and urgency. She appeared moments later, her face brightening momentarily when she saw him, but quickly shifting to confusion as she caught sight of the letters in his trembling hands. The air thickened with unspoken words, and Richard could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on them. He wanted to reach out, to comfort her, to tell her that they could face anything together, but doubt gnawed at him. What had she been hiding? As she approached, Richard struggled to find the right words. "Sarah, we need to talk," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. He gestured toward the letters, the unspoken fear hanging between them like a fragile thread. "I found these." The moment stretched as he searched her face for answers, for any sign of the daughter he had known, the one who had always turned to him in times of trouble. But all he saw was a flicker of something deeper: fear, shame, and a profound sadness. Sarah's eyes glistened, and he felt a pang of guilt wash over him. He could not imagine the depths of her struggle. As she opened her mouth to speak, Richard braced himself for her answer, expecting the typical reassurances, the ones that would soothe his heart. But instead, her voice was barely audible, heavy with emotion. "Dad, I didn't want you to worry. I didn't want to add to the stress. I thought I could manage it all on my own." The words struck him like a physical blow. His heart sank, and the reality of her situation began to take shape in his mind. Months of treatment, of pain, of fighting through the fog of illness while pretending everything was fine. She had endured this alone, all to protect him. The realization shattered him. How could he have let this happen? The sacrifices he had made felt insignificant in the face of what she had been enduring. Richard felt his chest tighten as he processed her words. "But why didn't you tell me, Sarah? We're supposed to be a team. You don't have to face this alone." The plea in his voice was palpable, a desperate attempt to bridge the chasm that had opened between them. He needed her to understand that their bond was stronger than any burden. Tears spilled down Sarah's cheeks, and she wiped them away, her voice shaking. "I thought I could handle it, Dad. I didn't want to put that on you. You've worked so hard all your life, and I didn't want to be the reason for more stress." Each word was laced with the weight of her love and the burden of her suffering. Richard felt the room spin as he processed her bravery, her unwillingness to let him down, even at the cost of her own well-being. The air grew heavy with unspoken thoughts. Richard reached out, pulling Sarah into an embrace, feeling the warmth of her spirit against him, even as the reality of her illness seeped through their shared moment. "I wish you had trusted me enough to share this," he murmured against her hair, his heart breaking for the pain she had endured in silence. "We're family. We face things together." In that moment, Richard was reminded of how fragile life could be, how easily the roles could shift. He had always seen himself as her protector, but here she was, the one shielding him from the storm. The thought left him feeling hollow and yet more determined than ever to stand beside her. As they pulled apart, he saw the flicker of hope in her eyes, a spark that reignited his resolve. "Let's figure this out together," he said, his voice steady now, filled with a newfound strength. "We'll find a way to get you the treatment you need. You're not alone in this, Sarah. I promise." And as the words hung in the air, Richard felt a shift within him, a determination to not only support his daughter, but to confront the shadows of his past. His estranged brother, a successful doctor who had distanced himself from their family. The thought made him uneasy, but the urgency of Sarah's situation left him with little choice. He had to swallow his pride and reach out for help, for her sake. As they sat together in her room, the stack of bills now a symbol of their shared struggle, Richard knew that this was just the beginning. They would navigate this challenge as a family, and perhaps, in seeking help from his brother, they could begin to heal not just their circumstances, but the fractures that had long existed between them. With hope blossoming amidst the uncertainty, Richard's heart swelled with the realization that love could bridge even the most daunting divides. Richard's resolve solidified as he sat in silence, his mind racing with possibilities. He glanced at the bills again, the figures stark against the backdrop of Sarah's vibrant room filled with memories. Each envelope represented more than just financial strain. They embodied the fear and isolation his daughter had endured. A surge of determination coursed through him. He wouldn't let her continue to bear this burden alone. "Dad," Sarah's voice broke the silence, soft yet filled with a newfound courage. "I can't ask you to do this. I don't want to put you in a tough spot with your brother." Richard shook his head, the memories of their fractured family history looming large but not insurmountable. "You're not asking, Sarah. I'm telling you. You need help, and I'm going to find a way for us to get it. You are my priority, always." His tone was firm, the kind of certainty born from years of hard-earned wisdom. As they sat together, Richard felt the weight of his daughter's gaze upon him. She was searching for something, validation, assurance, maybe even a glimpse of the father who had always fought for her. He took a deep breath, recalling the many times he had navigated difficult waters. "You know, your grandpa used to say that family is like a ship. Sometimes it sails smoothly, and other times it faces storms. But no matter what, we keep sailing together." Sarah smiled, a flicker of hope lighting her features. It was a small smile, but it carried the weight of their shared history. "I just didn't want to cause any more waves," she confessed, her voice steadier now. "We'll make it through this storm, I promise. But I need you to trust me," Richard replied, his heart swelling with pride for her resilience. The trust she had shown in shielding him from her struggles was a testament to their bond, and he felt an overwhelming need to reciprocate that trust. With a nod, Sarah leaned back in her chair, her expression shifting from uncertainty to determination. "What do we do next?" Richard grabbed his phone, the device feeling heavier than usual. The thought of reaching out to his brother stirred a cocktail of emotions within him. Resentment, longing, regret. But he pushed them aside, focusing on the present. "I'll call him. We need to discuss your situation." He hesitated for just a moment, recalling the last time he had spoken to Jonathan. Their relationship had soured years ago, marred by misunderstandings and the weight of expectations they had placed on each other. But now, faced with Sarah's health, he felt the urgency to reconnect. He could no longer allow pride to dictate their family ties. Dialing the number, Richard could feel the churning in his stomach. Each ring felt like an eternity, and when Jonathan finally answered, it was as if a door had creaked open to a long-abandoned room. "Richard?" "Hey, Jonathan," he replied, his voice steadier than he felt. "I need to talk to you about Sarah." The pause on the other end was deafening. He could almost hear Jonathan's mind racing, parsing through the implications of his brother's call. "What's going on?" Richard took a deep breath, the weight of the moment settling heavily upon him. "She's been dealing with some health issues, and I found out she's been hiding medical bills from me. I need your help." Silence stretched again, and Richard could feel the tension building. "What kind of help are we talking about?" Jonathan finally asked, his voice cautious. "We need to get her the treatment she deserves. I know you have the resources and expertise to guide us through this. She shouldn't have to face this alone." Richard's heart raced as he spoke, the urgency of Sarah's health pressing against his chest. Jonathan sighed, a mix of concern and frustration evident in his tone. "You should have reached out sooner, Richard. You know I could have helped if you had let me in." A pang of guilt washed over Richard, but he pushed it aside. "I know. I should have, but I didn't want to burden you. I thought I was protecting her." "I get it," Jonathan replied, his voice softening. "But you need to realize that family is meant to support each other, not shield each other from problems. Let's meet and discuss this in person." "Thank you," Richard said, relief flooding through him. They made arrangements to meet the following day, and as he hung up the phone, he felt a mix of hope and trepidation. "Dad!" Sarah's voice broke through his thoughts, and he turned to her, seeing the flicker of anxiety in her eyes. "What did he say?" "I told him everything. He agreed to meet with us tomorrow," Richard replied, feeling the weight of her gaze. "Are you sure about this?" "I don't want to create tension between you two," she said, biting her lip. Richard reached out, placing a hand on her shoulder. "It's necessary, Sarah. I want to make sure you're taken care of. Family may not always be perfect, but it's time we start putting the pieces back together." Her expression softened, and for a moment, Richard saw the child she had once been, a girl who believed in the power of love and family. "Okay, Dad, I trust you," she said, her voice steady, and in that moment, he felt a renewed bond between them, one that would carry them through the challenges ahead. As the day turned into evening, Richard and Sarah spent the time reminiscing and planning for the meeting. They went through the medical bills together, discussing each one in detail, creating a list of questions for Jonathan. Richard was determined to arm himself with knowledge to advocate for his daughter fiercely. The hours seemed to melt away, and by the time the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm, orange glow across the room, Richard felt a sense of purpose he hadn't experienced in years. They would face this head-on, together, and he would not let his daughter down. "Remember when I took you to that carnival when you were little?" Richard asked, a smile breaking through his serious demeanor. Sarah laughed, the sound lifting his spirits. "The one where I won that giant stuffed bear?" "Exactly. You wouldn't let go of it for weeks. You dragged it everywhere," he chuckled, picturing the sight. "It was my best friend," she replied, her eyes sparkling with nostalgia. "Just like I'll always be your biggest supporter," Richard said, his heart swelling with love for his daughter. "We'll get through this, and I promise to be right by your side." As they shared stories and laughter, Richard felt the walls he had built begin to crumble. The fear of the unknown still loomed, but amid it all, the strength of their bond shone brighter than any shadow. If this story is touching your heart, make sure to comment from where you are hearing this amazing story. The next morning arrived with a sense of purpose. Richard woke early, his mind racing with thoughts of the meeting. He prepared breakfast for Sarah, the rhythmic clanging of pots and pans providing a comforting backdrop to the rising tension within him. As they ate, he watched her, the determination etched on her face, and he felt a swell of pride. "I'll be okay, Dad," she said, sensing his anxiety. "We're doing this together." "Yes, we are," he replied, determination solidifying within him. The drive to Jonathan's office was filled with an air of anticipation. Richard's stomach churned as he navigated through the streets, memories of past arguments and misunderstandings flooding his mind. But today was different. Today was about Sarah, and he would do whatever it took to ensure she received the care she needed. As they approached the building, Richard felt a mix of anxiety and resolve. He took a deep breath, glancing at Sarah, who met his gaze with a reassuring smile. "We've got this, Dad." They entered the office, and the sterile smell of antiseptics met them. Richard's heart raced as they approached the reception desk. Moments later, Jonathan appeared, his expression serious but softened by the sight of Sarah. "Hey, kiddo," he said, his voice warm as he embraced her briefly. "Hey," Sarah replied, the tension easing just a fraction. Richard stepped forward, the moment feeling monumental. "Jonathan," he said, extending his hand, which his brother shook firmly. "Thanks for meeting us." "Of course. Let's sit down and talk," Jonathan replied, leading them into a conference room. As they settled into their seats, Richard felt the shift in the room, a mixture of hope and apprehension. He glanced at Sarah, who was visibly nervous but held his gaze steady. "Tell me everything," Jonathan said, focusing on Sarah, his eyes searching hers. Richard watched as she detailed her condition, her treatments, and the burden of debt that had built up. Jonathan listened intently, his expression shifting from concern to determination. When Sarah finished, Jonathan leaned back in his chair, thoughtful. "I can help with this. We'll find a way to get you the treatment you need without you having to shoulder this burden alone." Relief washed over Richard, and he could see the flicker of hope in Sarah's eyes. "Thank you, Jonathan," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. As the conversation unfolded, Richard felt the tension between him and his brother begin to ease. They discussed treatment options, insurance, and the possibility of financial assistance. Each word exchanged felt like a step toward healing, not just for Sarah, but for the entire family. "After what?"